Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Warped Wednesday.
Warped Wednesday, and it's the special corn episode.
It's our 8th episode, which I have been informed is a very important number for our favorite bloody boy out there. So that's pretty exciting news.
I just sacrificed 8 cultists right before this episode to really curry the favor of corn, so I'm excited.
Yeah.
And I can make a curry out of the cultists, so it's a win-win.
Ooh, corn curry.
I'm excited for it.
So in honor of it being the corn episode, I figured we'd play our classic Whose Hellforged Artifact Is It Anyway?
We're really going to spice it up on people. Instead of the normal hobby roundup, we're going to dive straight into the game.
We're going to dive straight into the game. I want to get it out of the way because I have a good one selected. It's corn themed, so it's a corn artifact. So that's your hint.
Okay, hold up. So just a reminder for anyone at home, the game we play every episode is called Whose Demonic Gift Is It Anyway? I don't think we actually have a name for it.
We don't have a name for it, but I'm going to keep pitching ones each week.
That's fair. So the way this works is we should go ahead and find one relic inside the Demon's Codex or the Exalted Supplement, and we read out the description text of the relic, not what it does, not any rules, literally just the little flavor text above the relic, and the other person has to guess the relic just from the flavor text. It's always a lot of fun. Wallace, my friend, I have a special extra stinky gift for you to guess later. Let's start off with your corn one. What do you have cooked up?
Carved with runes of death and ruin, the edge of this blade glows with barely contained power.
Runes of ruin. I think they really should have worked on a better way to say that. Can't say that one fast. Let's see here. So some sort of weapon. But it wouldn't be Skull Taker or whatever that one, the axe is, because that'd be too easy. You wouldn't give that to me. That'd be disrespectful to give that to me. And it's not the relic Bloodthirster axe that stands back up, because it would mention something about that. Corrin has some relic, I can't remember the name. It does D3 damage, flat 3 damage if wielded by a monster. It's a sword that can be taken by a Demon Prince or one of the heralds. I'm drawing a complete blank on the name. Well, am I correct?
So I believe you're saying Argath, the King of Blades?
Arath, the King of Blades. Exactly what I'm saying.
Well, you'd be wrong. It was actually Skull Reaver. It was Skull Reaver. You're trash.
I knew it.
It's got the runes of ruin in it, baby. I thought that one might slip you up because it's got the word blade, and even though it's technically a blade, you don't think of. I thought that would get you. So all right, yeah, that was my relic for today. I think
your brain's a work of art. It's honestly intimidating how smart you are sometimes. Okay,
it's all about the meta.
Exactly. You definitely outmeted me there. Okay, hold up. Well, I have a particularly stinky gift for you here.
All right, I'm ready.
Etched into the demon's armor, or embedded into its flesh, this relic retains the heat of creation, the glare of its still more molten form, painful for witches to look upon, their powers twisting against them.
Oh, all right. Their powers twisting against them. That might get me because you said this was a. Are you trying to trick me? Are you trying to trick me and say that this is a stinky relic and it's not a Nurgle relic? Because
we're over here. We're not playing any game. We're playing the great game where every god is a competition. Who knows? I might have intended to find a Nurgle relic. I found one that was cooler.
Because that sounds, not like a Nurgle relic almost. Like at first I thought you were saying the Endless Grimoire. Or Endless Gift, excuse me. And
is that your final answer?
Well, then you started saying all this non-witchery. You said witches don't like it. And that's not the horn. I know that's not the horn. It's not the plague flail. It kind of sounds like a corn relic, honestly. It sounds like a rune or something. But we're going to just say Endless Gift?
No.
Okay.
It's the rune of Ruin of Grass for an Exalted
Oh,
Bloodthirster, because this is the 8th episode and we're going all Corn today. And I was a little bit salty that I lost the last one, so I had to get back with a really tough Corn relic.
I did get meta, but I did figure that was what you were
That's
doing.
true.
That sounded like the Corn rune.
Well, to be fair,
that
I said it was stinky, and it's embedded in still molten flesh, so it probably smells really disgusting when it's going in. So I mean,
yeah, fair enough. I mean,
yeah.
You did kind of prime the question there a bit, but what are we doing hobby wise now? What are we doing over there on your side of the rift?
There's a lot of great investments throughout history, like tulips, Beanie Babies, Bitcoin. I have an even better investment that I made years ago. I totally forgot about venom crawlers.
Oh,
so I got 4 venom crawlers a long time ago, and you can only literally run 3. I just thought they were neat, And then the new codex came out, and the Start Collecting box stopped being sold. They're not available, and they're literally going for like $80 each on eBay right now, which is insane because I got them for like $15 a pop on eBay, new on Sprue, a while back. So seeing that definitely made me appreciate them more. I've been hobbying them up. I got them to kind of a quick 3-color standard before for previous RTT, but I wanted to go ahead and I think they're amazing sculpts. I think the idea of demonic metal spiders is like everything people love about 40k. So I'm going back, putting a little time, painting up the trim some more, painting some cool little patterns on the guns, trying to add a nice kind of fleshy tone to the underneath the back armor where all the skin is. I'm just having a lot of fun with my venom crawlers. Wallace, my friend, what are you hobbying on?
wow, I can't believe the demon stonks are going up so much.
They're going up
on like the venom crawlers and all that. Well, I'll tell you. So I very recently had broken my hand, and today is the first day in which they have removed the pins from my hand. And they asked me, I didn't prompt this question. They asked me, hey, do you want to keep the pins?
I was about to ask you to keep the pins. Well, so
I got to keep
yes, right? You got the pins.
I said yes.
Yeah.
Which felt like very demonically satisfying because now I have these pins that went into my hand. And I've been working on a lot of Corn models, and I'm starting to think about the possibility of inserting these very same pins into my Angron model once I get one. So, the real butcher nails.
Exactly.
But cool. I've been working on a lot of Corn models recently. I just finished up my 90th Plague Bearer, and I'm moving on to making Bloodletters and Blood Crushers and that kind of stuff. I have a couple getting started boxes for Corn that I never finished. I only took the Bloodletters out of them and worked on those because that's what I needed out of the box. Now I'm going back. I'm actually building the rest of the stuff and getting the spray coated and all that. So
no, it's exciting times. I definitely have a lot of Blood Crushers I never built from a few Corn Start Collecting boxes.
Nice.
And they're brilliant models. I'm really excited to go back and hobby on those. And
they were speaking to me.
They're speaking to me. They look awesome. I still wish Cast Space Marines could take HQs on Juggernauts and stuff like that. Or even a simple jump pack. I'm not a greedy man. Even a simple jump pack for my HQs would be more than enough to make me happy. But we are where we are. Speaking of Cast Space Marines, speaking of Corn, speaking of the great game, this does bring me to our main topic of the day, which is, Wallace, you and I are going to sit down. We're going to hammer out a ranking. Every Chaos faction, most competitive to least competitive in the Nephilim season. How hyped are you for this?
I'm really hyped for this, and I'll tell you why. Because when I look for what's good in the book, I usually don't look at the same things that you do or that most players do. And that means a lot of the time I'm wrong, but every once in a while I find something extra spicy in there. So I think I have some pretty good takes about this.
I kind of feel like if this is like the kind of spectrum of 40k knowledge, which shout out to being a 40k player, I have a tape measure on my office desk. Basically, here's like the average like 40k knowledge. And most players are like over here on one end here. Yeah. I feel like I'm over here, you're over here, and maybe it's switched on some topics. I feel like you and I, like, we differ, but like both of us still like view the game way differently than most people. So I'm excited to see, because I feel our rankings are not going to be popular. So when we're doing these rankings, I just want to clarify for anyone watching, we're not ranking like an average list played by an average player. We're trying to see the best possible list, which again may not be the most popular list, may not be the list other people consider to be best, but what we think is the best possible list, played by the most experienced, most practiced player of that list. Each faction has best in the current meta. I'm excited for this, Wallace. I'm excited. We're gonna have some hot takes, and people like hot takes. People like rankings. Their brains light up when they see things numbered. It's a beautiful thing. People love seeing us argue. I'm sure. We could actually get a lot of views if we ever want to do like a boxing match or something, kind of like a pay-per-view fight. That'd be a lot of fun.
We could do that. Like it feels like all the big streamers and stuff now, they are always doing like, let's fight in real life or whatever. I feel like that's just do that, but with 40K players, see who wins. So why don't you start us off with your short list? What's your short list?
I'm gonna start with my least. I think the faction is worse. Okay, let's actually do a quick rundown of all the factions right now. Just clarify if you don't forget any of them. There's Chaos Space Marines, Thousand Suns, Death Guard, Chaos Knights, Demons. Unfortunately, there's no Renegade Guard. But we're basically going like a high level of the codexes. We're not going to be going every sub faction of every codex, because I think that would be a 5-hour event. It actually sounds really fun to do sometime, but that's just not this podcast. We want to keep it short so people can listen on their way to work or something and really enjoy sharing these demonic conversations with everyone. So we're going to do just the codexes. I'm going to start off with the one I think is worst. And I don't want to say this out loud.
Good.
I don't want to say this out loud because they're one of the newer ones. I'm going to put Chaos Knights at the bottom.
Ooh. So Chaos Knights at the bottom of the Chaos list. Like tierings.
Here's kind of the issue. It's when I say Chaos Knights are at the bottom, it's not because I think they're bad. It's because I think the other factions are super underrated and have some really cool jank that people aren't exploring. Actually, no, I'm changing it. Chaos Knights will be second from bottom. I'm putting Demons at the bottom right now.
Oh, wow.
The thing is, there's no faction that feels good to put at the bottom. You know what? I'm sticking my first answer. Chaos Knights at the bottom. That's my final answer. Button submitted.
Yeah.
Tell me why I'm wrong.
That Chaos Knights are?
Yeah.
Because they're good. That's the in-depth analysis.
Wallace, we're all good.
Well, so, okay, Chaos Knights can be pretty bad. Like, you can make a bad list in Chaos Knights, but we're not talking about a bad list in Chaos Knights. We're not talking about, like, a skew build where you bring 4 big knights and bring that to your local RTT. When I think of Chaos Knights at a high level, I'm thinking of things that can manipulate the board state in interesting ways. And I think there's a couple of builds that do that well, but in particular, I love House Corvix. I think House Corvix is by far the best Chaos House in most tournament formats, not all tournament formats. For instance,
I think especially on terrain heavy boards, like I've seen some WTC tables, where they would absolutely shine.
Yes, WTC is one major example because WTC tables are just littered with ruins and move blockers that normally Chaos Knights hate. But there's 2 things about WTC boards that are pretty cool. One is a lot of the boards actually feature walls tall enough to hide a knight, like hide one of the big knights, which means you can actually bring something like one of the Knight Desecrators or Rampagers, and it won't get shut off the table turn 1. That's crazy good. And that makes up a little bit for the move blocking. But you know what makes up all the way for the move blocking?
Wait, hold up, Wallace. I'm confused here because you've got this big knight, right? But stuck behind this big terrain piece.
Yeah.
And it's big enough to kind of avoid getting angles on. It's big enough that it can't walk around that. You lose. You're stuck. You've got this big knight stuck behind this big terrain piece. You sit there, you've got your smooth brain, and you just lose every game. Well, is there like a sub faction or house or something that would be good for this? I don't know. I haven't read the codex.
House Corvix is a really spooky house that's all like corrupted by Bellicor, and so they can actually like step through the shadows. And what that represents on board is for 2 CP, I believe. You can move through walls. Yeah, you can move through walls, and you can either choose 2 of the little guys or one of the big guys. And that means it's super good because it means your carnivores, which are already a ridiculously fast unit.
We move 14 inches, which is
they move 14
beautiful.
inches, but it's an infernal house as well. So you can even increase their movement by making them take some additional wounds just to get them exactly where you need them. And, you know, they can move through walls if you really want them to. And I've been watching a lot of games or playing a lot of games, and I've thought about situations where I'm playing a house where it would be better if I had the option to spend the 2 CP there. And almost every game I watch, I'm like, wow, I would have won this game if I could have done that. Like if I could ignore their move blocking Rhino and jump over this wall to get to that objective this turn, I could have put them on 0 on the primary against the Knight player.
Especially turns like 3, 4, 5 when, you know, people lose resources, people lose assets. They only got maybe like 1 or 2 units left to move block, and they can't block off every alley. Because the thing is, turn 1, they can kind of move block you, but then also kind of puts a unit behind so you can't just walk over. But it's like the turns, the late game, when it's only being walked through walls, is just, I mean, it's amazing, especially because they're OBSEC. That's the craziest part. You just have OBSEC moving 17 inches through walls. Beautiful, beautiful thing.
And Knights, House Corvix in particular, is nice because a lot of armies, they have to go out and get damage done early.
Hold up, Wills. We're not doing here. This is not a guide on how to play Chaos Knights. As fun as that is going to be. And mental note, let's do that sometime.
Okay, yeah.
This is a guide. We're ranking the best Chaos factions. I agree with you about House Corvax. I think it blows my mind every time I read it. We're ranking the best Chaos factions. And if you don't think Chaos Knights are the worst faction, 1, you're wrong. 2, what do you think is the worst faction?
Don't put me on the spot like that, man. I love them all.
I know this physically pained me.
It hurts me. So, honestly,
like, I went with Chaos Knights because I think I have the least emotional attachment to them because I've played their faction for a long time.
I think it's somewhat of a toss-up for me, where I feel like Death Guard do a lot of things well now, and I really don't want to say Death Guard because I can think of a Death Guard list that I would bring to like a GT where you're spamming out Plague Marines and you're bringing like a couple of your little blender boys, maybe Plague Burst Crawlers for flavor. That list
maybe even
more
Mortarion, but that's a little bit of a too hot a take right now. Let's keep it going.
That's too hot of a take. I actually don't think Mortarion. I even at his new points, I'm not sold.
WTC wars where you can hide him turn 1. There's a list format there, but yeah, let's keep going.
Yeah, again, depends on format. ITC, no. WTC, yes. Like, again, right. I mostly play an ITC format.
Sure. You're a local home game where you can build a custom terrain piece that just happens to be 2 feet tall. Has everything.
It's just the silhouette of Mortarion perfectly sculpted to line up with your Mortarion.
Exactly.
No, so that said, Death Guard are very good as a faction, and I don't think I rate them last for, you know, any reason that like is they're bad. I think the main thing is still, even with the Plague Marines and Rhinos, which helps speed them up quite a bit, you still start gassing out around the halfway point of the game where it becomes a game of attrition. And a lot of times some of the top level factions like Necron will always win that game of attrition against you.
So I actually played a game against probably one of the strongest players locally. I'm running Necrons. It was all the stuff, you know, Silent King with his Resin Menhirs, the pregame OBSEC Dynasty. We played... I can't remember the names. I can never remember the names of missions. Diagonal 1, 3 objectives in the center. Ended up actually pulling that one out with my Death Guard. I don't even think it was an optimized list because I ran Mortarion just because I simply wanted to get him on the board and see how he felt. Caveat, I did just like spike every single 4-bit on Morty, and he just didn't die, and he didn't die the next turn, he didn't die, and he just took huge chunks out of the army. But I think the army is play. Because what you need against Necrons is they have a lot of 2 damage, like basically all their melee is 2 or 3 damage. So that -1 damage makes them really tough to deal with. That Gloaming Bloat, being able to, you know, flash outbreak that on someone or spread that from Mortarion is really strong in a mobile body. I think there's definitely some counterplay. I think they also have decent play into Sisters, or at least a better game plan than a lot of factions. So I see what you're saying. I don't always feel like Knights are going to be more vulnerable, whereas Death Guard would be more consistent. Like Knights, sometimes you just lose a game and it's not really your fault. And to be fair, sometimes you win a game and it's not really your fault either. And Knights players don't want to get to your head.
My main thing with the Knights thing is like, again, with House Corvex, which is the way that I
Yes,
would
agree.
play it, you can stall the game out and wait till the game becomes about what happens on turn 4 and 5.
Yeah, but
And
there's just
then
some boards where you can't hide enough of the little guys.
sure, like yeah, there can be tables where you just don't have enough
Yeah.
terrain, but I feel like those tables, like Death Guard, also don't like those tables at all. Like if I'm comparing the two things, like if they go first against my Death Guard and I can't hide all of my pieces, they're gonna destroy my rhinos and get rid of my mobility. So as long
I
as I
kind of
can
feel like
hide,
Death Guard can make a pretty small deployment profile relative to the amount of bodies they have because they have rhinos. Plague bursts can be really far back. Drones are actually pretty short. There's often some terrain pieces can still hide them, or make it hard to get angles. Whereas knights, you've got a lot of pretty tall bodies. Even if you're going all war dogs, which I agree is one of the ways, or one big boy, one war dogs, and like the rest war dogs or something.
yeah,
I will say knights are helped because you can take Abaddon, who does solve a lot of those deployment issues, but that's a whole other can of worms. Okay,
yeah.
so for those at home, we have right now the ranking started. Mike has Knights at the bottom, Wallace has Death Guard at the bottom, and they're both at each other's throats, telling each other how wrong the other is. This is exactly what people came here to see. Okay, so who's your second worst faction? I went first last time. You're gonna go first this time.
um, man, it is really tough.
I know, right? Oh, I will
I
say,
am,
by the way, for those people at home, we've gone through a ranking. Neither of us said demons so far. Just saying that. It's kind of notable for people at home. Which
that's due to like, so demons as a total faction are pretty terrible right now. I think there's like one or two lists that shoot them up a couple tiers.
yeah, but we're playing the best list by the best player. So
Right. Thousand Suns would be my choice. I got him, ladies and gentlemen. He left the room. Mike has left the server.
I can't. I can't. This is it.
Thousand Suns are
I can't
really
spend my time
good.
talking with a guy that thinks the Thousand Suns are the second worst cast army. Wallace, what do you have to say for yourself? This is just unimaginable.
Yeah, so Thousand Suns are really good, and obviously I have a lot of bias because I like them a lot, and I like the Warp Meld Pact. I like Sandgors, and their secondary game is amazing. No matter how you build them, like if you want to go double Terminator brick, or if you're spamming bodies, like they're very good at the secondary game, and I think that is why they will continue to do well competitively. However, I'm pretty much in my brain arguing against them and what my next pick is. And I think a lot of the things that they do well are things that my next pick also does, but also has other options, more angles of play to do better. I think Thousand Suns still has some matchups that you just generally don't want to see. And, you know, running into those matchups, you're going to have a rough time. As an example, I think Sisters are kind of not a good matchup for Thousand Suns.
Sisters were a much better matchup for Thousand Suns than people realize.
It's not by any means like you're going to get blown off the board or anything like that. You're not just going to lose for free or anything. But
just teleporting warp flamers, they just like pick up the army.
Yeah, but they can screen your teleporting warp flamers, and then they can run out there with their 15 point per model Xerafen and just make you look like a joke because all of their units are cheaper than you. Yeah, but like multi-melt is like we can keep listing things. I think Sisters are not a great matchup for Thousand Suns. I also think Necron are not a great matchup for Thousand Suns.
Well, Necrons are not a good matchup for anyone. I mean, you've literally mentioned the two top armies right now. Like, yeah, these aren't great matchups. I think,
but we're talking about the highest level, and I honestly think
Suns are decent into Necrons because Necrons really don't like taking mortal wounds in the psychic phase. They just hate it as a faction. Hate it. They only have one deny, or like one 4-up deny. So one deny, generally one 4-up deny. One person which you can easily measure range from. Easily just keep farming psychic interrogation, warp ritual, just make that one thing undeniable, and then cast everything else out of range. You can really easily outplay them there. Pretty good profiles, a lot of AP2, really good profiles for killing Scorpec, killing Wraiths, good volume to put down Scarabs. You can get angles on them teleporting. I'm telling you, like, no one has a good matchup in Necrons right now, but Thousand Suns, I feel more confident than I would with almost any other faction.
Well, what's your pick for this position for above the bottom?
Oh, don't. It's much easier to criticize other people's picks than make your own. Well, stop
Go
making me do
ahead.
this.
Good. No, go.
Um,
Good. Choose one. Choose one.
I'm gonna say
Impress me.
demons. I'm gonna put demons on the table.
Okay. Fair
Demons
enough.
are the second worst chaos faction right now. Again, it's not that I think they're garbage. I think the demise of demons has been overstated.
Yeah.
But part of it is, frankly, I think they just have a lot worse matchups. I think the lists that are probably the best demon lists have a lot less demons and a lot more other stuff, which I think you explored. I'm gonna let you talk more about that in the demon section.
Mhm.
Or did we talk about that last episode? I can't remember.
I mentioned how much I like certain lists for
Yeah.
demons,
But
but
demons, you're going to want to bring in war dogs. You're going to probably want to bring in Abaddon. And the demon lists, if you had a list of like pure 2,000 points out of Codex demons, not feeling great about that. You probably take Disciples of Be'lakor and hope for some matchups.
yeah.
It feels very inconsistent. It's not that I don't think they have a pretty high skill cap still in a good player's hands. I just think they're very inconsistent. And there's just some matchups here can get run over.
Yeah. I don't mind you placing them there. What's your pick above them?
We're doing this.
Yeah, what are you picking above them? Go ahead, say CSM. I want to see it. I want to see you say CSM. I want you to say that Chaos Space Marines are worse than Thousand Suns, so that the win percentage that comes out in the next month is going to just make you look just horrible. And I can clip this.
You
and
look
send it
horrible
to
for even
people.
caring about win percentage as a metric, but that's a separate discussion.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and put Death Guard
Yeah,
right
fair.
in the middle. Third best, third worst, the Blessed Trilobe, the Blessed Three. I think it's a good place to put them. It's a pretty fair place to put them, I feel. They definitely, the new secondaries have been such a boon to them. Played a couple of games with them. I think they're really good. I think Spread the Sickness is a little bit busted. I think Despoil Ground and Fleeing Vectors are really solid second or third choices. They still do stuff like Warp Ritual pretty well. Plague Marines just absolutely are way too killy and way too tough for their points these days.
Yeah.
I still think the drops on demon engines like Flesh Mower, or excuse me, the blow drones with Flesh Mowers and Plague Burst Crawlers, I think were just absolutely just gifts from Nurgle's heart himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that Mortarion points dropped isn't really moving the needle that much on him. You're still not going to bring him in an optimized list, but he's better if you do want to run him because it's an amazing model, which I totally understand. I still think, again, I wish they had some more speed, which is why, but I think you're going to need to bring things like bloat drones and Plague Burst Crawlers just to be able to reach out and either get some mobility, an objective control with a 6-inch heroic intervention, or just some artillery to like pepper back objectives. Like I played against a game against those the other day. They had a unit of like 4 or 5 of those Voidsmen, those little like auxiliary units you can bring, put them on back objective. I was like, fine. Just went ahead, plinked away those with artillery because it was going to do nothing to all his dreadnoughts. And by turn 2, I'd killed the Voidsman. He had to go send a dreadnought back to hold that back objective. Love the board control they give. Who would you put as your third chaos faction?
So Death Guard rank lower for me than what you say there, because for me, Death Guard are they don't play the shooting phase as well. Like, yeah, you have a couple of free guns on your Plague Marine squads, but it's not a lot. You kind of feel like you have to bring Plague Burst Crawlers if you want to threaten shooting, and that shooting is not strong enough to prevent Chaos Space Marines from being able to deploy a lot of their important units kind of on the line and push them at you.
Yeah, Death Guard can be a bit disrespect in deployment. I will say, though, they do have one tech piece, the Foul Blight Spawn with the Revolting Stench Bats, which I still think is one of the best tech pieces in the entire game, in terms of giving you really good counter into that Chaos Space Marines matchup. Or other armies that just want to disrespect you, like melee lists that just want to start in the line and disrespect your shooting. That Blight Spawn is like absolute game winner.
But Blight Spawn is good, but Chaos Space Marines have more tools in their toolbox than most factions do to interact with and counter the Blight Spawn. They have turn off auras if you're playing Night Lords, which
if you're playing Night Lords, you're a legend. Nothing will work for you.
But they also have a lot of factions that have access to both Fights Last and Fights First, and that combination can turn off the Blight Spawn's effect. Fights First
does stop Fights First too. So I think things like Black Legion Terminators that have the stratagem to become Fights First are still going to be in World of Hurt there. But I think factions like Emperor's Children, I think, are definitely a nice counter with all the Fights Last they can hand out from Lucius and the stratagem. I also think that Creations of Bile are a pretty good counter to Death Guard because fights on death, it's like kind of like fights first in the sense of you're always going to be able to get some action. I do think that it's still a good tech piece. I do think that I do think the artillery nerf definitely hurts them a bit, probably more than most other factions because they just didn't really have the speed to interact with things behind enemy lines. They really needed that good artillery. I'll give you that point.
Yeah, so kind of my point is like Chaos Space Marines are a better get into the middle and grind faction than Death Guard are, in my opinion.
Sure.
And they have more options for shooting to make your opponent have to play respectfully.
I mean, Chaos Space Marine shooting, I don't know if you tried to fit in some lists. There's a lot of ugly stuff in that codex in terms of the shooting. I think the codex is amazing. I think the variety of options is amazing. The shooting's pretty garbage, which is to be expected.
So yeah, kind of why the reason I rated Thousand Suns lower than Chaos Space Marines is I feel like Chaos Space Marines does a lot of the same things that it does, but better. Okay. And you can even take one of their best units, which is the Rubric Marines, and you can put them in your list so that you have access to the Warp Flamers. But not only that you have access to those Warp Flamers, but you have access to those Warp Flamers with +2 hits per gun, which is crazy. So,
it is. Well, I will say there's a chance it gets FAQ'd. I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's unfair to use it in the meantime or cheesy, but I do think there's a chance it gets FAQ'd. So
yeah,
I'll hold off on that, celebrating that.
Well, but I'm counting it if I played today, right? So in my tier ranks,
yeah. At the end of the day, you can never know what the FAQs are going to be. You can only ask about today.
So in my tierings, Chaos Space Marines do what Death Guard does better, and they do what most of what Thousand Suns does better than Thousand Suns. So I rate them above both of them. So it becomes challenging for me now because it's do I rate Chaos Space Marines above Chaos Knights?
Well, let's quickly recap the rankings for everyone at home. I just finished my third ranking. Right now I have a fifth were Chaos Knights, fourth were Chaos Demons, third were Death Guard.
Mine right now is we have the Death Guard on the bottom, we have the Thousand Suns above them, and then we're getting to place 3. So place 3 is where I'm now asking myself the question of, do Chaos Space Marine go here, or do they go above this spot? And I'm thinking of what remains. So what remains for me is Demons and Chaos Knights, and I'll get to why I'm putting Demons in the top 3 in a second. So I'm comparing them now to them and Chaos Knights. And what Chaos Knights have over most of the builds that you can get for Chaos Space Marines is Chaos Knights have a lot of fast OBSEC units, which make the primary pretty hard for most Chaos Space Marine players, particularly some of the stronger builds for Chaos Space Marines like Word Bearers, which don't have access to a lot of OBSEC shenanigans. That said, I think the best Legion is the Black Legion because of their ability to pass around OBSEC or turn off OBSEC. I think into Black Legion, Chaos Knights are going to really struggle, even House Corvix. You have a lot of pieces that can pick up their pieces.
Sure. No disagreement there.
Yeah. So because of that, I'm choosing to put Chaos Knights as my third faction choice. I think they're still very strong. I think House Corvix has a lot of angles of play, and anything that has more angles of play is really good at a high level because it means you can pivot your strategy in the game.
Movement shenanigans win games. But I will say, I'm not seeing Demons there. We're now through 3 factions. There's only 2 left, and you have not mentioned Demons yet.
Right.
Give me a reason. One reason why Demons are not the first 3 factions you've listed.
So yeah, that's where we get to, are Demons the best Chaos faction right now?
And I'm gonna put you on the spot. You just put Knights as third. We're going straight to the second.
Yeah.
And thus, obviously, the first. Well, only 2 Chaos factions left: Chaos Space Marines and Demons.
Yeah.
Swear to the Dark Gods, I have plenty of shoes I'm willing to throw at my computer screen straight at you. Well, so you better not, here with the world watching, with the Dark Gods watching on Corn's blessed day, put Demons above Chaos Space Marines.
So
it's
tough.
Don't give me an it's tough.
It's tough, and it is tough. It is tough because Demons have access to some of the best things that those other other top 3 factions have. And what I mean is you can bring Dreadblades that help shore up your shooting problems, and you
As
can
can
bring
everyone else.
right, true, and you can bring Abaddon, which Abaddon is very good. He shores up one of Demon's weaknesses, which
I
is
agree. Abaddon is
melee.
very good.
So
I
if
agree.
your
Dreadblades are
demons,
very good.
right?
Then why the hell are demons even contention with Dreadblades and Abaddon, who have their own factions? Okay,
Hold on. What demons have is one of the best current objective security units in the game in horrors, and you can spam
yes,
horrors
you can
and
spam horrors
and summoning points in order to create a dynamic where your list is really effective at contesting midfield objectives. You can choose to make one of those units essentially unkillable, and that'll allow you to usually outscore on the primary.
Shout out to
And
the Changeling for helping with that unkillable. Such a
right,
great unit. I'm gonna miss when the Changeling gets to change.
and there's just not a lot of lists that can deal with that. None of the top lists deal with it super well. I actually think demons with that horror plus Abaddon plus Dreadblade blade build are favored into Necrons, into Sisters, into pretty much anyone that isn't building like skew volume of shots, which like the worst matchups for demons for a long time were like Hail of Doom Eldar, just because they had so many dice, and that's gotten weaker. Like I think Eldar are still good.
And I will say, Wallace, with Zinch as my witness, you put Thousand Suns second from the bottom when they have the Zangor Army of Renown, which is a perfect counter to a low volume of shooting world. I'm just saying, but you can keep going.
Yeah, and I actually think Warp Meld Pact is definitely up there. I've gotten a chance to play it a couple of times, and it always feels really good. And I actually think it's quite good into a lot of what
it's in a great
is.
spot.
But it's not as able to deal with Necron, which do just like essentially it's just a vibe check of saying, hey, do you have enough obsec and enough dice to get rid of my obsec? And I feel like Necron do that pretty well, and so do Sisters. So that's kind of where in my brain I'm putting Thousand Suns down. So yeah, demons are probably second. I'm very close to saying first.
No, you're not.
I'm very close.
If you want to stay friends, you're not close to putting demons first. Oh my gosh, Walls, it's painful to watch. But I'm glad
I'm very
you got there
close
eventually.
to saying first because currently in practice games against some of the best factions in the game, including Chaos Space Marines Word Bearers, that demon list with the horrors, Abaddon, and the Dreadblades is 6-0.
I don't actually record. I agree. That's why I think Word Bearers are not the best Chaos Space Marine sub faction. Not even close to it, because they just get outplayed by a lot of armies. And the only matchups that are really strong are matchups Chaos Space Marines are already very strong. But that's a separate discussion. Well, I'm going to shoot a challenge. Hopefully we can get streaming game stuff because people would love to watch this. But my Chaos Space Marines would bury your demons into the dirt.
Well, but you also that's kind of the thing where it's like we've already thrown the baby out with the bathwater, because it's what am I going to run into in a natural tournament environment, not what you're going to bring to counter me.
Top tables with my Emperor's Children.
All right.
We bring out a shovel, bring out a body bag. We stuff every single horror you own in that body bag, and then
I don't think you can do it. I don't think your list will have the dice that you need to do that. And also the Zenich Locus is surprisingly quite good. It's surprisingly quite good into a lot of these factions, and just essentially
including Chaos Space Marines.
It essentially becomes -1 to hit against a lot of these factions, which is phenomenal.
Chaos Space Marines, yeah.
So yes, so the reason I hesitate to put them above Chaos Space Marines is very simple. There was a change to how ruins work recently that allows in more formats of play for you to effectively charge my demons through walls. And previously, when you could scum people out of being able to do that, I actually would have rated demons higher, because then I can control the melee game and the shooting game.
I never thought I would say this, but GW, thank you for that FAQ change, which is pretty horrible on the whole, I'm going to be honest, but it saved us from the ignominy of Walls putting demons #1. So shout out to James Workshop for their amazing balance as always.
Yeah, there was a world where that didn't happen, and then like 90 Pink Horrors wins a major, like because no one has the faction that deals with that anymore. So
I agree. The list is super underrated, but it's not. Again, when I'm sitting here saying these things about demons, it's not out of love. It's not out of hatred for the faction. It's out of deep, deep love for the faction. Just more love for other cast factions right now. I think demons are a very underrated spot. I think I genuinely wish there was more time until the codex coming out because no one knows the exact release date, but we're starting to know that sooner rather than later in the grand scheme of things. I wish there was some more time because I feel like there's still stuff being explored. That's the crazy stuff. Crazy
and
part about it.
so really simply, since this also spoils what I'm putting in first when we choose what's second, right?
Sure.
Chaos Space Marines, I don't have enough data on yet to be able to say confidently that they are worse than that list, but I can say confidently that that list that I just mentioned is better than almost every competitive list in the game right now. What I mean is that I think Chaos Space Marines have a list that we have not solved yet because there hasn't been time to solve this. But they have a list somewhere in that codex that will allow you to do some really unfair broken things. And I think that list is probably either Creations of Bile or potentially Black Legion.
Yeah,
because both of them have well, Black Legion because it controls the primary phase incredibly well.
Sure.
And Creations of Bile because it has an incredibly powerful secondary. And because of the inclusion of Rubric Marines with Warp Flamers, you bring a unit that makes them have to play around your shooting, which changes the game. Like if you have one unit that makes them not be able to deploy on the line with Creations of Bile, your game is a different game because their combat is so oppressive. It's very similar to Harlequin in that way.
Well, and that's why I'm almost a little scared to experiment with Creations of Bile because I'm worried I'm going to get attached to that Legion trait and this will be changed, which I think is completely unnecessary. I think they're very different armies. I think when Harlequins have just insane mobility, it's very different. When they have army-wide fight and death, and can get wherever they want. But I'm worried GW won't see it that way. I'm worried they're going to see some cast players do well and decide that they're not going to allow this to happen. But I mean, at the end of the day, any faction get nerfed, which is why I say don't worry too much about FAQs, except for like obviously broken things that are very likely to get FAQ'd. Well, Suki, we've got your final ranking. Please, top to bottom, one time for the listeners at home. Just put it straightforward.
The best faction is probably Chaos Space Marines, followed by Demons, followed by Chaos Knights, followed by Thousand Sons, and then followed by Death Guard. And I think all of them are very powerful. All of them could win a large event, and I wouldn't be that shocked, if they did.
Easily. In fact, we have a Death Guard list we've bannered around that I think could very easily go 5-0 at a very large event. I'd be not shocked at all.
So it's crazy because Chaos is actually in a great spot right now because I can look at that at a high level, right? I can look at that and I can say, wow, I feel like with all 5 of the super factions, I have a way to win like a GT level event or higher.
Yeah. There's no Chaos army I don't feel that one of us couldn't take to 4-1 right now at an event, which is a really good spot to be in overall. Okay. Walter, are you curious who I have it up top?
Of course. Yeah. I want to see how you solve your pile of a list that you've been putting together. You're just garbage list.
Bottom of Chaos Knights. Next Demons. Next Death Guard. That leaves us 2 beautiful factions. Thousand Sons. The Scions of Tzeentch themselves. And the Chaos Space Marines. The Bringers of Destruction. The Despoilers. And frankly, I feel both of these factions are incredible. But, Wallace, my friend, I can't share your optimism about Chaos Space Marines. I think they're in an amazing spot. I think the book's incredibly strong. I think it has 1 or 2 flaws which hold it back from being truly, truly top tier, unlike this other army. So I'm going to go ahead, go on the record. I'm sorry, Corn. I'm sorry to do this to you on the special 8th episode, but I'm going to put Thousand Sons, Tzeentch's own Legion, the #1 Chaos army right now, ahead of Chaos Space Marines.
Okay, hearing that, I move them down. Demons are now the top list.
Hearing that, I'm going to reintroduce Renegade Guard and put them #1, just to put all of your factions 1 lower. Also, shout out to Renegade Guard. What a bunch of heroes.
Yeah.
I can't believe they're gone. I miss them so badly.
Me too, buddy. Me too.
Yeah. Remember Malefic Lords? It was a simpler time back then.
well, the Renegade Guard, like a consistent ITC faction winner for Renegade Guard, actually lived in Alaska for a while.
Oh, that's right.
And
He was the only one that would bring them to like local events. And just the only person with 4 scores all
yeah,
year.
yeah, he was the only
Incredibly
person
fun
that
guy. It
got to
was
four.
Joe, right?
Yeah, yeah, and he
Yeah,
was the only one that would ever get him to four.
the 4
And
events.
I saw the light leave his eyes the moment that faction went the way of the
It hurts.
dinosaur. It really hurt
Yeah,
me, like on a personal level. I'm like, they couldn't just throw in like one Brood Brothers like rule or
I know, right?
something. It's just it was such a bummer.
Yeah, I will
Um,
say I think Lehman Russes are actually in a great spot now. So I'd love to bring some Lehman Russes for fire support, but that's a separate discussion.
Speaking of Lehman Russ, what about Thousand Suns? How's why are you putting
Thousand
them in the
Suns,
first
they
place?
can put together an incredibly consistent game plan, and they've got the secondaries to back it up, which I think is where a lot of the other cast factions fall short. Cast Knights secondaries, other than Ruthless Tyranny, really not a great bunch with a nerf to Storm of Darkness. Death Guard, Spread the Sickness is amazing. The other two factions are okayish and a bit more situational. Demons, faction secondaries, we've talked about how good your reality rebels, your drinking your reality Red Bull is, but yeah, it still lacks in the other two. I think Cast Space Marines, the faction secondaries, are going to hold back what's otherwise an amazing codex. I think that's one of the puzzles I still haven't solved yet. I think I've put together some Cast Space Marine lists that are incredibly strong. Playtesting is going very well, but I do worry that the highest levels, the lack of faction secondaries, when I've seen how easily Necrons and Sisters and some other armies can put together game plans. I literally don't know how the Iron Warriors secondary made it to print. Like how no one looked at that and thought you have to do it starting your movement phase and you have no opposing units on the objective. Literally, how does that make it to print?
I honestly think that a lot of them are just terrible.
Like they're straight up trolling at that point. I literally think it was like a balance thing. Like the codex might have been too good in the playtest in your room, and they're like, Iron Warriors are so busted, we have to give them an unplayable secondary just to make sure they don't ever score 45. It hurts.
Right. And I mean, like, I think because of how bad their secondaries are, other than the Long War, you probably are playing Creations of Bile at the highest level. I don't know for sure. Like Black Legion
Emperor's Children, just because the board control they do plays very well into the Long War, and then you're just bringing it from there and trying to hold their secondaries low.
But I think Creations of Bile is slightly better than Emperor's Children personally, because you have access to just more angles of play with the advancing charge. And
what a Legion trait! I mean, that Legion trait by itself is like a 2 or 3 CP stratagem in other books,
and it beats all the melee armies, and
it makes it very exactly. All I have to do is tech for shooting because it's very hard to lose to melee armies, but at the same time, still a finesse army. It's not an auto win.
And Black Legion makes up for the lack of secondary by being able to play that primary game so hard by turning off other people's obsec and giving people obsec. Like you can go in the middle and just claim the middle, and you can claim the middle, and like a lot of these other good factions that were reliant on some MSU obsec units and clearing you off objectives, they're not clearing you off objectives, and their obsec doesn't work. So that's why I think Black Legion, if somebody comes up with the right build, which is probably like Terminators and Abaddon and something, that list will, I think, do very well. But again, you're right. Secondaries are not what they're good at, and Thousand Suns are great.
Is you do want to often take second interrogation or warp rituals cast Space Marines. So when summoning is removed, again, if it's removed, we don't know the full details of it, but there's a chance that makes that cast Space Marine secondary game worse because you can't take a little Herald of Slanesh just to pop up 55 points to call it a day. That's why Thousand Suns, I'm incredibly optimistic. I think the drop to rubrics makes them real hitters now for their points. I mean, it kind of just put this list together, just like hit me the other day. Like a squad of 5 rubrics with an icon, all flamers, it's 117 points. What? That's crazy cheap. It's very durable. They're a psyker that can basically auto cast warp time on themselves to get amazing angles and play the primary super well. And we can teleport. You can give them Doom Bolt very easily just to teleport around and do just unreal psychic damage. Just cool. Eat 3 plus D3 mortal wounds. Oh, and then we can smite for a flat 3. I think Drubrix right now, with a drop to flamers and icons being free, are one of the best troop choices in the entire game right now.
Yeah, no, they're fantastic. Yeah. And that's my thing is like, I think that Chaos Space Marines use that same unit very well.
Yeah, it's different. Chaos Space Marines is more of a wrecking ball, and Thousand Suns is more of like a scalpel.
Yeah, and we played recently, and I brought the Rubric squads along with Warp Melt Pact as like a one of unit that goes out with automata,
Yeah.
and they do R&D for me, and they
Yeah, I
shoot
think
you.
that's great. A great tool.
It was really good. So having had that experience with them, I'm like, I feel like they're very, very powerful. And obviously they are,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. It's tough. So I do think putting them in first place isn't wrong, because their secondary game is really consistent, like you said. And
Mhm.
you can pretty much walk into any game and say, if I lose, I probably got at least 80 points still.
That's true. And
You
that's
know?
really good. If you want to make a deep run in a tournament, there's always a chance you lose the game. If you can still put up like a 90 spot in the loss,
Yep.
you're feeling in a really good spot in terms of the final standings. You'll still be in that top 5. You'll still be one of those very good chance around a podium.
Yep.
For this game best in faction. And I do wish Chaos Space Marines, let me say it like this, the next mission pack, if they're going to go with this future trend of just putting secondaries in the mission pack, I really hope they rethink the Chaos Space Marine secondaries in the next mission pack. It feels like they all feel like the old wording, because basically every secondary, like Spread the Sickness, our banners got changed to, if you control it, you can start the action. Whereas every single Chaos Space Marine secondary that goes on objective says you can't have an opponent on the secondary. Like it feels like there was like a mistake, or there was miscommunication somewhere, or they just sent it to printers at the wrong time. They didn't get all the quality of life upgrades others had. There's Thousand Suns, again, you start with the battalion, Cult of Duplicity, it's not super fancy. And you have a lot of similarities between the lists, but I think that core is so incredibly strong in a good player's hands. I feel like you have answers for everything.
What if Iron
to,
Warriors, like their secondary, what if your opponent just didn't deploy their army? Like you could get like a 15 on that maybe.
Well, again, it does say that your opponent places them on the board. It doesn't say the opponent can't place them in your deployment zones. Your opponent could just place 3 objectives in your deployment zone. Yeah. And then
I
they
don't
just
know how
never
you
and then they never
shake
move
that,
to your
but
side. Yeah. Because
yeah.
then if they never move to the side, then they can't ever be on the objective to stop you from doing it at the start of your movement phase.
So Iron Warriors are amazing if you can get into your opponent's head and like
Yeah.
somehow convince them to put all those objectives on your side, so that you can
Agreed.
score them at the start of your movement phase or whatever. Yeah.
Well, I still think the secondary is so bad. I still don't think you maxed it actually if they're all in your deployment zone. Let me see here.
That would be hilarious. That would truly be the next level. It's
Yeah.
also like it's like 2 paragraphs of text.
Well, hold up. It's actually one of the benefits of the Arm Warrior secondary is you give your opponent the book, turn the clock on, and say, "Hey, you're gonna have to play this mini game for like 5 minutes at the start," and they don't realize just how worthless it is. Literally, don't think. Just toss 3 objective markers randomly, but they're gonna be like, "Wow, hold up. Why'd they take the secondary? There must be some big brain play." And they sit there like reading it over and over. And again, because no one they've practiced with before will ever pick the secondary, so you can play some mind games. Oh, I'm checking this here. So say you pay your opponent. You say, "Hey, place all 3 of these demolition tokens in my deployment zone." You only score 12 actually, because you only score 4 point for every demolition site you perform the action on. You score 3 additional points if the objective marker was within 6 inches of the deployment zone. So actually, they actually straight up put all of them in your deployment zone. You're capped at 12.
Okay,
It's actually the best case scenario. You're still capped at 12, whereas
no.
Necrons or Sisters, that's not good.
They put 2 in your deployment zone, 1 in theirs, and then they just allow you to do it. That's the best case scenario.
That's true. They literally walk away from objectives to make sure they don't accidentally. Oh, I'm sorry. So my intent is to actually not be on this objective so you can score points.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry to all the Iron Warriors players. Just run 3 Wards of Skulls and run them at your opponent. And...
Hold up. Iron Warriors are amazing. They've been just crushing it in playtesting. I think they're one of the strongest armies in the game, but their secondary, yeah, is just a complete mess that should never make it to printers. Well, let's go ahead. I think at this point, I feel bad for everyone. This point, sure. Work commutes.
Yeah.
They're probably done with their bathroom breaks. They're probably done with their lunch breaks. They're wondering when these 2 talking heads will stop yelling at each other. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for the special 8th episode, the corny episode of Warped Wednesday, corny even by our standards. It's been a pleasure sharing our thoughts on chaos with you. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you all next Wednesday.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Wolves.